Hello everyone and welcome back. Today is a celebration. It is the 3,000 subscriber Q&A. Thank you all so much for subscribing to this channel, for following along this journey that I am on. I've been making videos for years, and to finally see them gain some traction and to take off a little bit is so rewarding. Thank you all so much for watching the videos, for commenting on the videos, for liking the videos and sharing them. There are many, many more to come and lots of directions that I would like to take this channel into the future. But to celebrate 3,000 subscribers, I'm going to be doing a very special 3,000 subscriber Q&A. So you guys gave me questions. I'm gonna give you my best attempt at some answers. So let's jump right into it. Simply_FW says, congratulations. Can you talk about the process of applying to college with being homeschooled? Do they request something aside from transcripts? Was graduating early from K-12 an option? Okay, so I know some pieces of this. My parents would have a much better answer for you because they had to do more of the administrative side of things. Yes, we needed to create transcripts. My mom did that by going through everything that we did and basically formalizing it into a document that could then be sent out. So when we had a literature class that met, formalizing that into, okay, what was the class? What books did we read? What were the assignments that were done? And then giving me an actual grade on those assignments. I didn't get all A's on absolutely everything. I know there were places, especially in math, I really struggled with Algebra 2. I did it through Khan Academy and really struggled. I then did it through a program called Alex, and I ended up making it through. We had a math tutor that I worked with as well to actually get through that. But I think I ended up getting a B in Algebra 2, just because it was something that I really struggled with and it was something that took a lot of time to kind of get through. So my parents were very fair when they created those transcripts. So then there were certain requirements that were necessary just to graduate from high school to start with. One of those being a language requirement. So that was the toughest one to fill. Language isn't really something that works super well when you're doing it independently, right? Like everyone's doing Duolingo right now, but I don't know that many people that are doing Duolingo that are actually becoming fluent in the language that they're doing. That being said, I don't know how many high school Spanish classes actually produce students that can speak fluent Spanish either. But languages are tough to learn in a vacuum. So when I started taking classes at Columbus State, our local community college, one of the things that I focused on was taking language classes. Now, the nice thing was one college language class, right, which lasted one semester, counted as 1 year of high school language credit. So I believe I needed 2 years of a language to pass high school in the state of Ohio. I ended up taking 2 semesters of Spanish at our local community college, and that sufficed the requirements. Okay, so in terms of graduating early, I had friends that graduated early. I also had friends that graduated a little bit later. They kind of waited an extra year, kind of wrapping up everything in high school before moving on to college. The people that graduated a year early ended up being less productive than the people who graduated a year late. So from what I've seen, the people who graduated early ended up being less socially, emotionally successful than the people who graduated late. I do not understand this obsession in this country with graduating early. If you're in college and you're 17, you're gonna have a fundamentally worse college experience than if you're in college and you're 19. It's just a fact. If you're more emotionally mature, if you're more prepared, if you're more grown up, you're just gonna have a better experience. You're gonna have a better experience making friends, you're gonna have a better experience in the classroom, you're gonna have a better experience overall. So while there may be options to graduate early, I just simply do not recommend it. Wait. At CIM171 asks, are there things you would have changed or wanted to include in your experience? I've talked about this whole experience in a very rosy light. I loved homeschooling. I think there was a lot about it that was absolutely fantastic and that worked really well for me. Looking back on it, not everything was perfect. I'm sort of sad that I never got to go to prom. I'm sort of bummed out that I didn't get to have a traditional high school experience. I think that dating in college was a little bit harder for me because I hadn't been around a bunch of people and been able to learn those social dynamics and how to date younger. But I also got a lot out of homeschooling. I was able to make movies and TV shows in my garage when I was in high school. I didn't have this overhanging burden of homework and the stress and pressure that comes with that. And I had throughout this the option to go to school. My parents were not telling me I had to be homeschooled, but I wanted to be homeschooled because I liked the way that my life was going and I like the way that my life has turned out. I'm really happy with where I am now. I'm really happy with the career path that I've been on. I'm really happy with the relationship that I'm in. I'm really happy with where I live in life. I'm really happy with what I'm doing. So trying to look back and say, oh, I wish I had done this thing or this thing differently, it's kind of hard to say that. Now, of the things that I might change, I think that I entered college a little bit young, and that transition was pretty rough for me, as I've talked about before on this channel. So if I were to do it over again, on the one hand, I can totally see a version where I would have wanted to go to high school. I think that would have aged me up a little bit faster. I think it would have given me a lot of social advantages when it came to going to college, just based on my personality. I think I would have built up a lot of the things, made a lot of the mistakes that I made in my freshman year of college throughout my experience in high school, and I likely would have had a really great time. But you can't split test life. I can't go back and say, oh, I wish I had done that, because then there were so many things that I got to do because I was homeschooled. I think that a gap year could have been really valuable for me, having to work for a year. There is something about going to college right out of high school that everything kind of feels fake. So I came out of this high school world that was just all about learning cool stuff. And then I went directly into college, which I went to a liberal arts school. It was all about learning cool stuff. So there wasn't that like real concretized, like this is how you make money and this is how you actually exist as an adult in the world. That didn't come till after I graduated. And I think that's the experience of a lot of people. Had I graduated high school and spent a year doing, let's say, the highest paying job I could do without a college degree. So maybe this is something in construction, this is something in property management, this is something that an 18-year-old can get paid, somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000 a year to do. And I had done that for a year. That would have served as a backstop for me when I was in college, that I could look back at that and say, oh, if I don't figure out where I'm going with my life, I'm going back to that. And I think it would have made me more serious about what I was doing. I probably would have tried to get more involved. I probably would have tried to milk my college experience a little bit more. But again, I got a lot out of college. I had a really good experience, especially academically. So it's really hard to say what I would change. At Xavier Cheney 8431 asks, where is the line between maintaining an organic friendship and being able to set requirements for friendship? Do you think that by setting rules up for friendships, you've already gone down the wrong path? Okay, so there's the first piece of this, which is like setting rules up for friendships. I don't think you're necessarily setting up rules, but you're putting in boundaries. We all have implicit boundaries with people, right? Like if anyone, even our best friend, threatens us with a knife, we're gonna say, hey, that's not cool. There are other things that we're allowed to say, I don't wanna do that, or I don't wanna go there. It's not about setting up requirements of like, hey, you need to do these things. It's simply being strong and holding in, what are the things that I value? What are the things that I care about? Where are the areas that I'm not willing to be pushed in this friendship, in this relationship? I've had experiences in the past where I've been in situations where I start to feel embarrassed by my friends, like they're embarrassing me. And instead of standing up for myself, I kind of just let it happen. And what I found is that over time, that corrodes the friendship. That if I feel like someone is embarrassing me, if they're belittling me, that's not very good grounds to have a solid friendship on. If earlier in the relationship, I had a boundary that said, hey, I'm not going to be embarrassed. That's not cool. If somebody starts saying that, I go, hey, dude, please, like, come on, what are you doing here? That wouldn't have been a requirement that they had to obey, like I'm some king and this is some decree. It would have just been, hey, I don't want to go there. And then they can choose whether to cross that or not. And if they do choose to cross that after I've told them like, hey, please don't do that, then that's another conversation to have. I don't think this is about making requirements for friendships. I think this is about having internal boundaries that you don't want to be crossed. And instead of just being this porous open border that people can come in and out of and they can walk all over you, saying, these are my edges. This is what I believe in. This is where I stand. And I'm willing to interact with you from that place. To me, at least, it's not about having some requirement for the other people and like having standards for yourself. All right, moving on to the next question. At Sia Songs 9333 asks, so what do you do for work these days? How do you feel homeschooling prepared you for what you do now? Okay, so there are a couple of things that I do for work these days. Number one, I work for the Columbus libraries. So I work as a customer service specialist, which means I'm the person when you come into the library, I say like, hey, welcome to the library. I help people find books. I help them with their accounts and their cards. I help people print materials in the library. And generally, I assist customers in the library to make sure that they're able to fully use library services. So I do that part-time. I find that's a consistent way to kind of make a steady income. And then I also own a film production company. So my film production company is called Gentle Embers Media. Gentle Embers Media has produced movies, it's produced music videos, it's produced a lot of corporate video over the years, and I both work as a full in-house production studio, and then also I hire myself out as freelance. I'll go and work on other sets, I'll work with other crews, I'll work as a cinematographer or a production assistant on other sets. So right now that's how it's divided. It's a pretty even split economically between the two jobs, though it's far less consistent on the production side. I might have a great month or a great couple of months where I make way more than I'm making at the library, but then I'll have a couple of months where I'm getting little to no client work. And so if you average it across the year, they end up being fairly similar. Over time, I would like to move entirely to that production side of work, but I've found that only doing that doesn't give me the stability to be able to focus on doing what I want to do. If I was only doing that work, I'd be forced to take on more clients that I don't necessarily want to work with, or clients that would be more problematic. So I've elected to kind of split my time between those two enterprises. So that's what I do for work. I work for the library and I make movies. All right, at Cam 0327 asks, hello, I am a homeschool mom of an 11-year-old, 7-year-old, and 4-year-old. What classes or subjects do your parents focus on, and what would you say helped you the most to prepare for your life/college? Okay, what classes did we focus on? Let's start with that piece of the question. The things that are jumping out at me are not specific classes, but an overall ethos. So my parents had a belief that learning should be enjoyable, it should be fun, and it shouldn't be punishment. So when we were learning, we were following our curiosities, we were following our understanding, and we were growing as people. It wasn't about just sitting your butt in a chair and staring straight ahead and focusing on the thing that you're focusing on. At its best, it was a more fully embodied experience of learning. That being said, I hated reading The Grapes of Wrath. Like, I absolutely hated reading that book. I had to read it for the class that my mom taught. I really disliked doing math pretty much my entire life, but I sat through it and I did it. So not all of it was like necessarily enjoyable, but the energy around it was enjoyable. One of the things that I found is that a lot of the actual specific knowledge that I learned as a kid has left. You know, maybe we spent a year talking about geology and there's a couple of facts I can pull from that. But the same thing's also true from college, that if I go back to certain classes, if I think back on my, ancient philosophy class that I took, there's like, I can name the philosophers in the class, but once we get into the actual theories, because that's not something that I'm actively thinking about, it's pretty much faded away. Now, I think if I were to go back and read about these things again, a lot of that might come back. It might kind of trigger memories that are currently dormant, but a lot of it is not in my active memory. So I think a lot of the learning is less about sort of what are the specifics that you're actually learning at any given time. Like if I had to go do a complex math equation, I would still have to look up how to do it. It's much more about the process and approach that we're teaching. I learned how to write. I learned how to read, both nonfiction and fiction, and enjoy doing both of those things. I learned how to work with other people in groups, both when I was a manager of those people and I was also one of many people that were working together. Those are the kind of skills that have lasted across time. Those are the things that I still rely on every day. So for instance, right now, I'm really passionate about ancient philosophy. I've really been getting into Stoic philosophy at the moment. That directly comes from me living in an environment where that was encouraged. Not necessarily Stoic philosophy, but following your interests, following your passions, following the things that you care about, and seeing that as valuable. Growing up, it was very clear that the world wasn't just dollar signs. It wasn't just about how much money you can make from learning this thing. It was about what is the richness that you can get from it? What is the value you can get from it outside of just the monetary value? Maybe it can make you a more compassionate person. Maybe it can make you a more educated person. Maybe it can make you a more grounded person. So right now, where I'm reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, I'm doing that because I want to do it. I don't know if I hadn't been homeschooled, if that's how I would be electing to spend my time. So I think focusing on kind of an overall feel as opposed to worrying about the specifics, at least for me, I think that's what worked really well. All right, last question here. At Masiska asks, would you like to homeschool your own kids one day? Opinions on screen time for kids. Okay, let's start with, would I like to homeschool my own kids one day? The answer is maybe. My fiance's a teacher. She works for the public schools. I think there's a lot of good that comes out of being in an environment with lots of other people. I think there's a lot of good that comes out of that kind of collective learning. I think as we move forward, it's going to depend on what our kids' temperaments are like and what we think would be best for them. Like I've said in the past, I think there are some people who homeschooling is a great fit for, and I think that I might have been one of the most ideal candidates. I'm someone who's very self-motivated. I'm someone who really wants to learn. I can be somewhat disagreeable, but I'm also willing to go with the flow. For other people I know, I don't think homeschooling was nearly as great of an option. You know, they didn't have that same self-motivation. They didn't have that same drive and passion to learn. So I think to some degree it depends on just who our kids are. Are they people that I think would thrive in a homeschooling environment, or would that be a big struggle for them? Inversely, are there people who I think would do really well in school, or would that be really, really hard for them to go through? That's going to be one consideration. I also could totally see an option down the line where we do something that's more hybridized. So maybe it's a Montessori school for part-time throughout the week, and then I'm homeschooling them outside of that. Or they're enrolled in some classes, but they're not like fully in school. Or maybe they're fully in school. Or maybe they're fully homeschooled. I have not decided yet. I think that's going to be a conversation that my fiance and I continue to have over the years. That's something that we think about, and we are thinking about that rather deeply. I think there are advantages to homeschooling, there are advantages to going to school, and it's going to depend on where we're at in life, where our kids are at, and what our kids are like. Who are they as people? That is definitely something that is on our minds and something that we have talked about already quite a bit. Second half of that question, my opinion on screen time for kids. Look, here's the thing. There are screens everywhere. It is really, really hard to avoid spending time staring at screens. But in my life, I've found an inverse relationship between the amount of time that I spend staring at screens and my happiness level. Meaning that the less time that I stare at screens, the more happier I am, and the more time I stare at screens, the less happier I am. I believe that fundamentally we as humans were meant to go out and live in the real world to experience real things. As a kid, I didn't get to play Minecraft, but we dug massive holes in my backyard. And I think that there's something really, really valuable about actually going out and living and experiencing the tactile world around you as opposed to this two-dimensional portal that we all have in our pockets. I don't know what the world's going to look like when I have kids. I don't know how ubiquitous, these like AI interfaces are going to be, that we are all interacting with screens all the time. I certainly hope not. I hope that we can spend time in nature, in the real world, interacting with it. Look, the biology that we have was not built for the world that we currently have. And I think that's a lot of the unhappiness and anxiety that currently exists in our world today stems out of that. And the more time that we can spend connected, the more time that we can spend grounded, and the more time that we can spend in the real world, in my book, that's just all for the better. So I hope for my kids that we're not going to spend a ton of time on screens. I also don't want to be a total tyrant about it either. And I think the most important thing for me is making it clear to them why I think it's better to go out and live in the real world than it is to spend time in this like digital world where everyone's siloed and we're only getting the opinions that we agree with all of the time. I think it's a net negative for most people. Less screen time, I think, the better. That being said, I'm also a guy who loves movies. I make movies. I'm going to make my kids watch lots of movies. So, there's a give and take here too. It's not 100% one is bad and 100% the other is good. But I think striking that balance between the two and recognizing that when I spend time out in nature, when I spend time in the real world, when I spend time interacting with things in 3D and people in 3D, I'm just simply happier. Okay, thank you everyone for submitting questions for this Q&A. This was a lot of fun to make. I hope you enjoyed watching it. And please feel free to leave more questions below. I will try to answer them in the next one of these. I am so incredibly grateful for your support on this journey, and I'm really excited where this channel is going to go in the future. Really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. All right, peace everybody.